Bryan Johnson is by far the most loved and hated anti-aging influencer at this time.
This is day 9 of investigating Bryan Johnson's story. Is a scam.
So I decided to analyze every single protocol he's done. So far, he's experimented with 46 unique supplements. He's implemented 85 protocols. 15% of those were exercise, 8% for his sleep, 31% were therapies, and interestingly, 45.9% of his protocols were measuring health. Yet the reason why Bryan is hated among some people was his past failure to report all of his health data, such as his LH and FSH levels, which are key markers for whether someone is on testosterone replacement therapy or not. Bryan did in fact share his most recent results on April 15th, so we'll check that out, and in this video, I'm going to be ranking the best and worst of Bryan's health protocols using the latest science. I'm Hoan, and over the past year, I've been obsessed with optimizing my health, and in that time, I boosted my HRV from the 50s to nearly 200s, having a higher HRV than Bryan Johnson's 18-year-old son Talmadge, and I was able to drop my resting heart rate from the 60s to 37. Anyways, after learning and testing Bryan Johnson's protocol for a whole year, the number one thing I noticed is the lack of calories. By following caloric restriction, I went from repping 30 reps at 225 pounds in bench press to making 225 pounds my working set. Bryan is a big proponent of caloric restriction, and piles of studies confirm caloric restriction slows down your aging. And in fact, by going on a caloric restriction diet, I did bring my resting heart rate significantly down, making my heart efficient, but the trade-off was detrimental. Overall, it made me frail and have low energy throughout the day. And when studies looked at 34,500 patients across 12 countries, it was found that people who fractured their bones after the age of 60 were likely to die within 5 years because of lack of movements. Caloric restriction is the cause for weaker bone density, and while it might improve your lifespan, it significantly decreases your health span. So where do we rank caloric restriction? In order for a protocol to get into S tier, it needs to tick 3 boxes. 1, it needs to significantly boost your health data. 2, you must be able to easily implement the protocol. And 3, there can't be any trade-offs. For example, caloric restriction gave me a significant boost on my heart health, but it came at the cost of frailty, so I'm going to put caloric restriction in D tier. Okay, the next thing Bryan's known for is finishing his meals before 11 a.m. And in fact, piles of studies show that intermittent fasting improves gut health. When I often go on dinners with friends, this is my stress level during that night of sleep. While when I finish everything before 11 a.m., my stress levels are low throughout the night. Now, the reason some experts advise against eating all your meals early in the day is because spreading your protein intake across multiple meals support better muscle growth. Some people suggest the body can only effectively use 20 to 40 grams of protein per meal for building muscle. But this study debunks this claim by showing that eating in a short time frame has similar effects on fat-free mass compared with continuous eating protocols as long as you hit your protein intake. Considering the fact eating early is by far the most important factor for sleep, and if you want to spread your meals, you can still space meals out a little bit within that window, I'm going to rate this protocol in A tier. But the real question is, does Bryan really eat his protein?
When my protein was around 120, I think, my bun was a bit high.
That's your kidney ability to kind of process urea, which is in protein, right?
Right. So I lowered it to the 109, 110 range, and the bun came back down to 17.
At 170 pounds of body weight, this is not a lot of protein, especially if you're trying to maintain your muscle mass. Bryan is correct in stating that increased protein intake can increase your bun levels. Basically, a high bun level means there's more waste building up in your kidneys, which often makes your kidneys work a little harder than usual. However, besides from the kidney working a little harder, elevated bun levels aren't inherently harmful if you have a healthy kidney. And just from personal experience, I've lost more than I've gained, so I'm putting the low protein diet in D tier. There's a good argument behind it, but the sacrifice you have to make are way too huge. Now, is the lack of protein due to Bryan's vegan diet? Interestingly, it was found that Bryan has lower iron levels, and piles of studies found that iron deficiency is more common in vegans and vegetarians. Vegans do in fact get enough iron, but not enough bioavailable iron, meaning your body is not able to absorb them easily. There are 2 types of iron: heme iron, found in red meat, which can easily be absorbed, and there's non-heme iron, found in plants, which is harder to absorb. Low iron symptoms include fatigue, poor exercise performance, and cold hands and feet. Now, I know Bryan talks about his low temperature as a good thing.
Over the past few years, my body temperature has declined almost 5 degrees Fahrenheit.
Bryan says lower body temperature enhances cellular repair, increased lifespan, and lowers inflammation. But I think it could also be because of Bryan's vegan diet and low iron absorption. Personally, I do respect Bryan's mission to help animals through a vegan lifestyle, but he doesn't really emphasize the danger behind the deficiencies, and also his blueprint supplement stack lacks key nutrients like DHEA, vitamin B12, and zinc that are crucial for your health as vegans. And as a normal person not supplementing or getting blood examinations every month, I'm ranking Bryan's vegan diet in D for dangerous. Okay, but let's get into the good stuff. First, to Bryan's credit, he promotes high quality sleep as the most important thing in health. There's piles of studies showing that 8+ hours of sleep boosts your brain, heart, and muscle, while sleep deprivation causes serious brain damage. Bryan follows this 10-step sleep protocol, which gets you to sleep at the same time for 8 hours every single day. Studies found that healthy sleep depends on these 4 variables: sleep consistency, where you have the same bedtime and wake time; sleep efficiency, where you're not just lying in bed but actually sleeping; and sleep timing, where you sleep at least for 8 hours every night, and absence of sleep disturbances. And because Bryan's 10-step sleep protocol will get you to optimize these 4 pillars of sleep, I'm putting Bryan's sleep protocol in high S tier for super. Now, to promote sleep, Bryan says he uses grounding bed sheets.
I have some grounding sheets. There was some evidence that it helps on glutathione production.
What's the grounding sheet?
It's just plugged into the outlet to ground.
But is this even true? And what does he mean by helping glutathione production? Glutathione is a cleanup crew inside of your cells. It helps protect you from oxidative stress, and too much of oxidative stress leads to more inflammation, faster aging, and higher risk of disease. Now, there were no studies correlated with glutathione and grounding bed sheets, but the closest study I found was a study linked to grounding bed sheets helping you maintain this natural antioxidants called bilirubin. It's not the same as glutathione, but it also helps protect the body by neutralizing harmful molecules that cause cell damage and inflammation. According to the study, bilirubin rates drop much smaller in the grounded group compared to the ungrounded group. The study says that grounded individuals may have needed less bilirubin because they were already getting antioxidant support from the Earth's electron. With that being said, there were only 4 participants per group, and the data is not statistically strong enough to make definitive conclusion. While the results are interesting, we need bigger samples before calling this protocol science-backed, so I'm putting grounding bed sheets in C tier. Okay, let's talk about Bryan's workout. Bryan does the same workout every single day. He starts with resistance training, to stretching, to high-intensity interval training at the end. Now, there's 3 main issues with this. First, when you do the exact same workout every single day, your body adapts quickly, reducing your metabolic response over time. Second, Bryan static stretches during the workout, and inserting static stretching between sets of strength training or HIIT workouts can be dangerous because it can temporarily reduce force output and increase your chance of injury by lengthening your muscles. And 3, Bryan neglects explosive neural work. Even though Bryan does HIIT training at the end, there's little to no plyometrics or speed work, which means he's not training his rate of force development. And without incorporating exercises like jumps or sprints, your motor unit firing rates decline faster as we age, making us slower, but also our brain slower. If health is the ultimate goal, I think it's better off to incorporate a push-pull leg split or a upper body lower body split for strength training, while mixing endurance training, VO2 max training, and plyometrics for your cardio, and doing static stretches after your workout versus doing them during your workout. So I'm giving Bryan's exercise routine a solid C tier. However, Bryan's exercise timing might be one of the best protocols. Bryan recently told us to avoid high intensity exercise 4 hours before sleep because it kills your sleep quality. This happens to be very true from my experience as well, so I'm putting this on A tier. The reason why it doesn't get an S tier is because of the minor trade-off. I would say I'm a little weaker in the morning, and the reason behind that is your body temperature is the highest around 3 to 9 p.m., making this hour to be your strongest. Okay, let's talk about Bryan's supplement. Bryan takes 46 types of supplements. So instead of ranking, I thought it would be more helpful if we go over his top 3 supplements that actually helps him anti-age. So first we have NMN or NR. It offers higher energy production, DNA repair, and mainly sirtuin activation, which in simple terms is a longevity-related protein. There's piles of studies confirming both NMN and NR preventing aging. Like this 2020 human trial study says that 250 milligrams a day of NMN for 10 weeks in older adults improved insulin sensitivity and muscle function. According to Bryan, both NMN and NR are equally effective, and he uses the following brand.
For the NR, I tried True Niagen, and for NMN, I tried J Infinity's Vitality. They both worked. They both allowed me to achieve NAD levels equal to a 16-year-old.
Second supplement is spermidine. Supposedly, it should be in Bryan's supplement stack, but it was found that there were little to no spermidine found, so you might have to get your spermidines by eating mushrooms. Now, unlike NMN, spermidine works through autophagy activation, a different but complementary anti-aging pathway which helps the cellular cleanup and DNA repair process that declines over age. There's animal studies showing spermidine extending lifespan, and in human studies, it was found higher dietary spermidine intake helped with better memory performance and reduced cognitive decline. Now, there are 2 supplements Bryan takes 2 times a day. One is omega-3s, which is commonly known, but the other one is garlic. But why? Garlic helps your cardiovascular health and metabolic health. Compared to NMN or spermidine, it doesn't quite correlate with our longevity pathway nor the brain, but it is still a super supplement that we should be taking every day. Okay, the next thing I realized is Bryan's hair protocol. Bryan uses a custom hair formulation. Most people already know minoxidil causes heart palpitation as a side effect, but there's another chemical Bryan uses called finasteride that lowers your libido. In this study, patients who were treated with 5 milligrams of finasteride every day, erectile dysfunction rate was up from 3.4% to 15.8% of patients, while decreased libido in patients rose from 2.36% to 10% of the patients, and ejaculatory dysfunction was up from 0.9% to 5.7% of the patients. Obviously, this protocol gives you a tremendous transformation in hair growth, but if we were to judge it in a health perspective, this will go in F tier. But what about Bryan's other hair protocols? Bryan uses a laser cap that emits 304 laser diodes, and this study found that 650 nanometer red light did promote hair follicles to grow. But what's interesting is the duration. 5 minutes of red light treatment showed greater hair shaft elongation than the 10-minute treatment. This is likely due to the Arndt-Schultz law, where short exposures like 5 minutes activate cellular function, while longer exposures like 10 minutes can saturate our stress cells, reducing the beneficial effects. It's not this study alone, but piles of studies have shown that red light does improve hair, but because it's not necessarily improving health, I'm still putting this in C tier. Okay, so Bryan promotes getting sunlight within the first 30 to 60 minutes after waking up. It's not just Bryan, but Dr. Andrew Huberman, Dr. Peter Attia, even people who disagree with Bryan like Dr. Paul Saladino does this protocol. And piles of studies support that morning sun is one of the most effective methods for regulating your circadian cycle, so I'm going to put this in S tier. But the contradiction actually comes from one of Bryan's skincare protocol, which is avoiding day sunlight. So let's break it down. In this study, sunlight for better or for worse, they broke down the pros and cons. Starting with the cons, sun caused skin cancer, eye disorder, while on the positive side, it helps vitamin D synthesis for your bone and muscle health, reduce risk of colon, breast, and prostate cancer, improve your mood, lower your risk of MS or hypertension, and it prevents you from getting autoimmune diseases. So what does Bryan do?
You want to avoid high UV index, which typically happens between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. In times where the UV index is above 3, you can use a hat, sunscreen, or a UV umbrella.
While Bryan's more of an anti-sun guy, I really think getting more sun while avoiding the sun when the UV is over 3 is the most optimal protocol, so I'm going to put this in B tier. Now, Bryan is obsessed with improving this specific metric called heart rate variability, which can be tracked from your Apple Watch or Whoop. There's piles of studies showing that higher HRV correlates to longer lifespan, meaning it is one of the pillars that determines how long you'll live. Now, there's 7 factors that dictates whether you will have high HRV or not. First, we want to train our heart to be more flexible. You can do this by incorporating zone 2 and endurance training and occasional high intensity workout. This is the main reason how I was able to go from 50 HRV to 197 HRV. Second factor is strengthening your breath control system. You can train this by doing breath work. Third factor is lowering your biological stress marker. You can do this by avoiding inflammatory foods like seed oils and sugar and consuming more omega-3s, turmeric, and magnesium. Fourth factor is we want to lower this thing called angiotensin 2. You can lower this by exercise, good sleep, and having a low stress throughout the day. Fifth factor is increasing nitric oxide. Nitric oxide opens blood vessels and supports your nervous system balance, and you can increase nitric oxide by consuming beets and pomegranates and incorporating strength training to your workouts. And the last factor is activating your parasympathetic nervous system, also known as your rest and recovery mode. When your body is calm, your heart becomes more flexible and adaptable, so that's why you want to avoid foods or high-intensity workouts at night, and having a wind-down routine before bed is crucial. Bryan additionally uses HRV therapy devices, but when I looked up studies, I wasn't able to find anything that supports these devices. And because I used them for a whole year and had very little effect, I'm putting Bryan's HRV therapy devices in D tier, but I will put Bryan's overall HRV maxing habits in high B tier. Bryan was able to go from 30 to 70 HRV because of his choices of food, eating early, and his HIIT training workouts, but I still believe if he were to incorporate more cardio in his workouts, he could in fact get his numbers up to 100. The amount of cardio you do is the biggest factor that dictates this number from my experience, because when I got 197 HRV, that was also the time when I was running 40 to 50 miles a week. Okay, let's move on to Bryan's oral health. Bryan's oral health protocol consists of brushing 2 times a day and avoiding fluoride products. He flosses, uses a tongue scraper, brushes for 2 minutes, and applies tea tree oil. The purpose with oral health is first to avoid your teeth from rotting, but also protecting your microbiome by reducing the bacteria you swallow from your mouth. And because Bryan's extra protocols like using a water pick while avoiding environmental neurotoxins like fluoride serves both purposes, I'm confidently putting his oral routine in S tier. But what about Bryan's posture? Bryan has 5 protocols to get perfect posture. First is invisible string.
I'm just imagining someone pulling that string above my head. I'm trying to have my head straight like that.
Second is the phone slump.
When I have my phone up, I hold it up. It's awkward and it's potentially embarrassing to be the person holding your phone up like that.
Third is moving more.
I'll lunge, or I'll get down on my knees, or raise my arms. I'll do various stretches to move my body about. It helps me reset my body to have fresh posture.
Fourth is the shoulder exercise.
You want to bring your shoulders up and out.
And the last protocol is the head movement.
Hands on the forehead with some light pressure, and then you're moving your head up ever so slightly.
Out of these 5 protocols, the S tier of protocols are avoiding the phone slump, moving around more, and the head extension exercise, as studies have shown that mild chin-up movements open the airway for better breathing. However, with the invisible string, there is a catch behind it. The more upright your posture, not only is harder to sustain, this actually worsens your blood drainage, and the core reason why Bryan's trying to fix his posture is to improve his blood flow. So instead of focusing on standing up straight, a more science-based approach would be to breathe tall instead of pulling tall. The way to breathe tall is to focus breathing through your stomach versus your chest. As your stomach and ribcage expands, the spine naturally elongates without over-contracting the neck muscle. You'll naturally feel taller, but also you're not forcing or pulling it where it worsens your jugular veins. This is why I'm going to put invisible string in B tier. Now, to identify the problem with Bryan's shoulder exercise, we first have to understand why we want good posture. 1, we want better blood circulation. 2, we want to be able to breathe more oxygen in our body. And 3, hopefully not look like a nerd. Bryan's pulling shoulder exercise in fact helps you open up the shoulders, preventing you from looking like a nerd. But pulling your shoulders back aggressively with weights will restrict your posterior rib expansion, constricting your breath mechanics. So there are safer alternatives that still opens up your shoulders, like creating a circle in the wall. So I'm going to put this in B tier. A YouTuber called Zach Couple breaks down the whole posture mechanics on Bryan Johnson, so I'd highly recommend checking his videos out. Okay, another protocol Bryan follows models is wearing EMF clothing products. So the question is this a marketing scam or is it actually effective? Well, a 2022 study on electromagnetic shielding fabric compared 3 types of fabric: silver fabrics, copper nickel fabrics, and stainless steel fabrics. It was found that silver thread was the most effective at blocking EMF.
For babies to wear to help keep their heads protected. Oh, that's some effect. So it went down from -25 to -31. Is that a significant drop?
I think as we can see from the label of this baby cap, there's some metallic material that reflected the signal. So it works in a similar way as this metal plate. If I put it here, you see the signal power drops significantly. Okay,
so essentially it's putting a metal in between
yes,
the signal and you.
yes, correct.
However, the study also found that the weave type, porosity, density had a huge impact on how much EMF signals it can block. In the study, the most effective way to weave was using bidirectional yarns to avoid drop-offs at off angles. EMF clothing is for the micro optimizer, so while it's proven, I'm going to put this in B tier. So the next thing is Bryan experiments with many different drugs for longevity. As for now, Bryan experiments with 5 drugs: 200 milligrams of acrobose, 2.5 milligrams of tadalafil, 8 milligrams of candesartan, 10 milligrams of jardiance, and 140 milligrams of rapithol. Starting with acrobose, it was found in mice, acrobose actually extended lifespan, especially in males. Acrobose improves insulin sensitivity over time. It's usually prescribed to pre-diabetic patients. However, acrobose is not advised to people who have kidney or liver problems, and it is known to cause diarrhea due to unabsorbed carbohydrates in the colon. Overall, the reward is higher than the risk, so I would actually rank this drug in A tier. But I'm not sure if I could say the same with tadalafil. Tadalafil is the secret behind getting a metal pipe erection every night, but it significantly increases your lactic acid. While Bryan says is good for cardiovascular health, people have experienced heartburns, headaches, and a lot of serious gut problems, so I'm ranking tadalafil in D tier. Third, we have candesartan. There's evidence that candesartan reduces blood pressure, protects us from getting heart failure progression, preserves kidney function, and possibly reduce brain inflammation. But there are horrendous side effects following this drug, like getting terrible anxiety and heart palpitation, or experiencing brain fog and dizziness. So I'm ranking this drug in C tier. Next up, Bryan uses 10 milligrams of jardiance. There's good evidence of increasing lifespan by mimicking calorie restriction. However, the biggest side effect is getting infection around your genitals. This is because you are pumping sugar out your urine, and if you aren't clean, the sugar causes yeast infection. So I'm gonna put this in B tier. Lastly, Bryan takes 140 milligrams of rapithol. Piles of studies have shown it reduces your LDL cholesterol, but people have been experiencing headaches and body pain. I personally think you can control healthy cholesterol levels with good exercise and good diet, so I'm putting this in C tier. So Bryan says he's the most measured man in the world, while critiques come after him for not sharing all the data or not sourcing where his data's come from, while having bold claims that he has an 18-year-old body. In 2025 of April, Bryan did show his testosterone levels and LH-FSH level, proving he's not on steroids. Those taking TRT would show both LH and FSH being suppressed, but Bryan did get a normal range there. Now, if you check his data overall, you can definitely tell Bryan did increase his caloric intake, as his cholesterol levels and triglyceride levels were slightly elevated. Personally, I do think Bryan is doing a great job on testing and tracking his health. In tracking health, there's 3 major components. First, measuring the whole spectrum of health, which Bryan gets an S tier in this area. Tracking frequency, which we're not too sure how Bryan systemizes his measurements, so I can't quite rank this part. And behavioral change based on measurements, which I would give Bryan a solid A tier, as he's constantly updating his meal plans, like discontinuing his green giant or eliminating Brazil nuts in his nutty pudding. Now, if you're interested in in-depthly tracking health, you can screenshot the steps on the screen to figure what you'll measure annually, quarterly, monthly, and daily. Bryan constantly promotes building life systems to help you make better life decisions, and while there are controversies, I think his mission as a whole and progression to constantly test and discover deserves a solid S tier, while the culty side within Bryan, his supplement business, and the overall promise of having a biological age of 18 gets a F tier. By the way, this is a new format I'm thinking about making continuously, so if you have any feedbacks, please do let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.